פרק שני, משנה א'. משנתנו דנה בעניין החמץ בערב פסח. Our Mishnah is going to deal with chametz on the day before Pesach. מאיזו שעה אסור הוא בהנאה? From what time you're not allowed to have enjoyment of it. וכיצד יש לבערו? And how do you have to burn it? So it says, כל שעה שמותר לאכול, as long as you're allowed to eat, chametz בערב פסח, which is talking about chametz the day before Pesach. So if you're allowed to eat, מאכיל לבהמה, לחיה ולעופות. You're allowed to feed it to the animals, to the wild animals, and to the birds.
Obviously do it yourself.
So that's obvious. So if it's so obvious, exactly, why would the Mishnah need to say it?
Exactly.
If it's so obvious. Yeah, so let's see. If it's so obvious, why do you even say it? If you're allowed to eat, of course you're allowed to enjoy it. בגמרא מבואר, so the Gemara explains to us, don't think it's so strange. It's not so strange. שמשנתנו היא לדעת רבן גמליאל. Our Mishnah is according to Rabban Gamliel. And if you remember in the previous Mishnah, הסובר, Rabban Gamliel, we just learned it, חולין נאכלים כל ארבע. He says you're allowed to eat regular bread until the 4th hour. Utruma kol chamesh, and he divides. He says the Kohanim are allowed to eat truma on the 5th hour, and this is what the Mishnah comes to teach us.
Because they're in Bet HaMikdash?
No. Because it's truma. Even if in Be'er Sheva you're allowed to eat it. Yeah, even in their house, it doesn't matter. Uba mishnatenu lelamed, because it says holiness. You cannot. It's my responsibility to eat it. Don't tell me not to eat it. Uba mishnatenu lelamed, and our Mishnah comes to teach you. What does it mean? Kol sha'a shemutar leechol. It means in the beginning, any time that you're allowed to eat, not you. Any time that anyone is allowed to eat. It means, in other words, on the 5th hour, when the Kohen, you're not allowed to eat in the 5th hour. But the Kohen is allowed to eat in the 5th hour, you're allowed to, if he's allowed to eat it, you're allowed to have enjoyment from it. That's what the Mishnah tells you. כל שעה שמותר לכהן לאכול תרומה, every hour that the Kohen is allowed to eat his תרומה, היינו בשעה חמישית, which means the 5th hours, which means you're not allowed to eat on the 5th hour. מותר לישראל, but if you're not allowed to eat, are you allowed to do something else with it? So it says yes. מותר לישראל להאכיל חמץ לבהמתו. You, since he's allowed to eat it, you're allowed to feed it to your animals. כלומר, שאף על פי שישראל אסור כבר באכילת חמץ, even though you're not allowed to eat the חמץ, עדיין מותר הוא, you're still permitted, בהנאתו, to enjoy it. ונקטה המשנה, and the Mishnah says, מאכיל לבהמה, לחיה ולעופות, is allowed to eat it to domestic animal, wild animals or birds. להשמיענו שמותר להאכיל לבהמה, it tells you, you know you're allowed to feed it to your animal. Why would you not think you're allowed to feed the animal? Obviously you're allowed to feed it to your animals. It says because sometimes the animal doesn't eat everything. It leaves some behind. It says you're still allowed to, don't have to worry about it. אף על פי שדרכה לשייר, even though that it's the way of the animal sometimes to leave food behind, in other words, it's still in your possession, ויש חשש שמא יסיח דעתו מלבאר שיריים אלו, and we are worried maybe he's not going to come and burn these remainders, וכן מותר להאכיל לחיה, it says, so you're allowed to eat a wild animal, אף על פי שדרכה להצניע את שייריה, it says, why a wild animal? Because a wild animal sometimes hides it. It takes the chametz and hides it till it's going to stay for Pesach. ואינו רואה אותם כדי לבערם, and he doesn't see them in order to burn them. ואגב בהמה וחיה, and now, since he already mentioned the domestic animals and wild animals, נקט התנא גם עופות. So he included also birds. Because once you start saying them, say all of them. Neither thing is allowed to do it, which is obvious. Actually, we're going to say it's not so obvious, because there's going to be a disagreement. ומוכרו לנוכרי. He's allowed to sell it to a non-Jew. It's before Pesach. He's selling it, like a store. So get rid of it. Sell everything before Pesach. מותר למכור את החמץ לנוכרי. So you're allowed to sell in the 5th hour. This is in the 5th hour. Even though you're not allowed to eat it, you're allowed to sell the chametz to the non-Jew. Kol zman shemutar b'ana'ato, as long as it's a time that you're allowed to get benefit out of it, which is the 5th hour. It says, what's the problem? Why wouldn't you be allowed to? Of course you're allowed to. It's not yours anymore. What's the problem? Even though he knows that the non-Jew is going to eat it during Pesach. So it says, what's the problem? B'Gemara Mevuar, the Gemara explains that not everybody admits that you're allowed to do such a thing. Who doesn't say you're allowed to do such a thing? Sho'ilu Beit Shammai Sovrim, says the house of Shammai, they hold, Lo imkor adam chametzo lenochri, says one is not allowed to sell his chametz to a non-Jew, Ela im ken yodea bo sheyichalek kodem haPesach, only if he knows that the non-Jew is going to finish it before Pesach comes. If you give him such an amount that is unlikely to finish before Pesach, you're not allowed to give it to him. You're not allowed to sell it to him. Shelechen ledatam, it says, how does that make sense? Because you have a responsibility to what? Leva'aram min ha'olam. He says, according to Beit Shammai, it needs to be not here. It cannot be here just somebody else. No, it needs to be not existent. Sheken ledatam mitzvah leva'er et hachametz min ha'olam. It says, at that time, at the 5th hour already, it says they're allowed you to enjoy it, but it's such an enjoyment that destroys it completely. And if you're not destroying it completely, we're not going to allow you. A day before Pesach, you can do whatever you want. But this is the 5th hour. The 5th hour, you're commanded already on destroying it. Now we have a problem. When he says destroying it, we mean destroying it. You're not destroying it. Velo sheyeh kayam, not that it will be in existence. לפיכך באה משנתנו להשמיע שאין הלכה כדברי בית שמאי. So the Mishnah comes to teach you, don't think like Beit Shammai, you're not required to destroy it completely. ומותר בהנאתו, and you're allowed to have enjoyment out of it. בגמרא מבואר, בגמרא מבואר, שאם חרך את החמץ באש קודם זמן איסורו, עד שבטל טעמו ומראהו, in the Gemara it explains that if you burnt it before that time until the taste and the look is completely gone, מותר בהנאתו אפילו לאחר זמן איסורו. You're allowed to enjoy it even after the time of the prohibition. In other words, it's not befitting to be eaten anymore. This is not called chametz. I don't know what it's called. It's called dust. Call it whatever you want. So I give you an example. If people don't eat it anymore, it's not. Yeah, I'll give you an example. Let's take an example from our life. In some petrol station, they use ethanol. Right? I know ethanol comes from corn. Yeah, so they use ethanol. Ethanol comes from corn. So think about it. If you're Ashkenaz, how come you're allowed to drive during Pesach? It's chametz. You're not allowed to get benefit out of it. So how it? Because it is no one is going to eat it. It's been destroyed from being chametz to such an extent. It's not food anymore. It's not food. So once it's not food anymore, this is what he's saying. It's not food anymore. Nobody eats this. Then it's fine. You're allowed to enjoy it in such a manner. When it's not, in other words, according to him, once it's not befitting to be eaten, it's not called chametz anymore. The other says, no. The molecules is there. Beit Shammai says the molecule is there is chametz until you burn the whole thing completely. That it's different molecules. You have to turn it into something else. Okay. Let's go to the next section. Avar zmano. What happens if the time has passed? Zman achilato, the time of his eating. Hainu metchilat hasha'ah shishit. The 6th hour comes around. Asur be'ana'ato. You are forbidden in having any kind of enjoyment. Ve'af al pi shemin Torah, and even though from the Torah, אין החמץ אסור בהנאה אלא מתחילה השעה השביעית. The chametz is only going to be forbidden in another 59 minutes. We're going to do from 11 o'clock, not from 12 o'clock. We're prohibiting it. חכמים גזרו, the sages made a decree like we learned before, שיהיה אסור בהנאה מתחילת השעה השישית, that you're not allowed to enjoy it from the beginning of the 6th hour. כדי להרחיק את האדם מאיסור של תורה. It says, don't wait for the last minute, go an hour before. בגמרא מבואר, in the Gemara they explain, שאיסורו בהנאה בשעה השישית, that they prohibit from enjoyment in the 6th hour, דינו כי איסורו משעה שביעית ואילך. It is as strong as the 7th hour. Don't think it's less. How do we know it's as strong? Because I can show it to you it's as strong. If a person on the 6th hour comes, and when a person gets married to a woman, he needs to give her the value, a certain value, of a product. So usually we give gold. That's the ring that we give. But the ring has a certain value. If you notice that the rabbi always asks the witnesses to see, he asks them, is it worth? Does it look like it's worth more than? That's right, more than 2 pennies. Does it look like it's worth more than that? And the guy says, oh, it's gold. Obviously, it's worth more than that, and then it's kosher. What if a person comes to a woman, erev Pesach, on the 6th hour, and he gives her a loaf of bread that is worth $5, and he tells her, "Harei at mekudeshet li, behold, you are betrothed to me with this bread." Now, according to the Torah, it's not chametz. It's a 6th. Oh, so, but according to the Torah, it's not chametz. So is she married? That's the question. The question. The Torah says she's married. The rabbi says you're not allowed to enjoy it. So is she married or not? The rabbis are going to be stronger than the Torah? So it says, yes, this is the power of the rabbis. שאם קידש בו אישה משש שעות ולמעלה, if the person took this bread and he betrothed the woman from the 6 hours onwards, which means from the Torah she is mekudeshet, from the Torah she is married. She doesn't even need a get. He's not allowed to use it. She doesn't need anything. ואפילו בחמץ שאינו אסור אלא מדרבנן, even in חמץ that is only prohibited from the rabbis, אין חוששים לקידושה. We're not worried she's married. In other words, she isn't married. You can shout, you can scream, you can say, but the Torah said, God says, she's not married. Very good. Shows you the power of the rabbis. So she says she's not married. But once we said this is prohibited in enjoyment, that's it. We make it non-existent. ולא יסיק בו תנור וקיריים. And you're not allowed to warm with it, oven, two types of oven. אפילו לדעת רבי יהודה הסובר, even according to רבי יהודה, that סובר, שאין ביעור חמץ אלא שריפה. It says, you burn, that's what you do. Exactly. But since you... אסור ליהנות מן החמץ בהסקת התנור או הקיריים. It says, you're not allowed to cook in it or to get warmth out of it or to do. Yes, you have to burn it and waste it. You're not allowed to burn it and get enjoyment out of it. Because we just says, you're not allowed to get any enjoyment out of chametz, even if it's the rabbis. אף כשהוא מקיים בדרך זו מצוות ביעורו. Even when he's burning it, he says, what do you do? That's the way to do it. You burn it. You're not allowed to burn it in your house if you're going to get heat out of it. You have to burn it outside. Because otherwise everybody, and this is what the custom comes, to burn it outside in the street and not to burn it in the house, because in the old time, they want to burn it in the house. Oh, because exactly, and it was easy, but you're not allowed to because you're getting benefit out of it. That's why the burning of the chametz is always outside. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, en bi'ur chametz ela srifa. Rabbi Yehuda says the only way you can do bi'ur chametz, you can get rid of your chametz, is to burn it. In other words, you have to change its molecular structure. If the molecular structure stays, this is not called bi'ur chametz. For example, shelemedim chametz minotar, because he learns chametz from the remainder of the korbanot, of the sacrifices. Ma notar shehu bebal tutiru. If you have a sacrifice, you're not allowed to leave it there more than 24 hours or 48 hours. It depends on the sacrifice. So it says, what do you do if you're going to see it's going to take more than 24 hours or 48 hours and you didn't eat it? You have to burn it. In other words, you have to make it not a sacrifice anymore. It has to be stopped being a meat. change the molecular structure. ודינו בשריפה, and it needs to be burnt, אף חמץ שהוא בבל תתירו. חמץ is the same thing. שהרי עוברים עליו בבל ייראה ובל יימצא. Just like the sacrifice that is not allowed to exist after 24 hours, חמץ is not allowed to exist during the 7 days. ביורו בשריפה. חכמים אומרים, חכמים says, no, you're going too much. I don't have to change the molecular structure. I just have to remove it from the world. What does it mean to remove it from the world? That it doesn't look like chametz. חכמים אומרים, אף מפרר. חכמים says you can grind it into small little pieces until it becomes dust. Nobody can... That's fine, and throw it to the wind. It does. The molecular structure is still there. I'm not worried about it. את החמץ לפירורים, you can make it into small little particles, וזורה לרוח, and throw it into the wind, so the wind will spread it. או מטיל לים. Or you can throw it into the sea, and it's going to become rotten over there. בגמרא נחלקו המוראים בפירוש דברי חכמים. The Gemara have a difference of opinion in the explanation of the words of the sages. רבא מפרש, רבא explains, שמפרר שאמרו מוסב על שניהם. רבא says, no, you cannot just מפרר, in other words, goes on both of them. Which both of them? כלומר, שבין שהוא זורה לרוח, whether you are throwing it into the wind, ובין כשהוא מטילו לים, or whether you are throwing it to the sea, צריך לפררו. You need to... In our opinion, it says to grind it, that's right. You need to grind it. According to... אבל רב יוסף מפרש, not in both of them you need to grind it. אף מפרר וזורה לרוח, it says either you grind it and you throw it into the wind, או מטיל לים בלא פירור. You can throw the bread into the sea without making it into small little particles, because the sea is going to take care of it. You don't have to worry about it. כלומר, שמפרר מוסף על וזורה לרוח. It says, when it says to grind it, it only means into the wind, בלבד. ברם לא נחלקו אלא במטיל לשאר נהרות. It says, the disagreement is when you put them into regular rivers, sweet water. אבל כשמתאים לים המלח, when he throws it into the ocean, into... Yeah, I think it means, it doesn't mean sweet water. Yeah, I don't think it... Actually, good question. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I can see that the Yam HaMelech completely destroys it much quicker. So I understand why, but I'm not sure it can be, maybe it is Yam HaMelech, but I don't think so. I think it means ocean. Salty water. לדברי הכל אין צריך פירור. Then for sure you don't need to grind it because it's going to get destroyed. In other words, if your bread fell into a lake, you take it out, you might eat it. It falls into the ocean, it's all salty. You can't eat it anymore. That's the idea. טעמם של חכמים שחולקים על רבי יהודה, the reason on the sages that they go against רבי יהודה, לפי שנאמר בנותר, it says when it comes to נותר, you mean the sacrifice that has to be destroyed from the earth, it says, ושרפת את הנותר באש. It says, the Torah tells you, specifically you have to burn it. It doesn't tell you how to destroy it. It tells you specifically how to destroy it. שהיה לו לומר, ושרפתו באש. It says, and you should burn it in fire. It shouldn't have said the word notar, because you know on the verse what it's talking about already. So it says, why did it say specifically notar? To tell you only notar and not other things. Only notar is fire. Other things are not. No. That's right. אלא בא כתוב ללמד שהנותר בשרופה. It comes to teach you that notar only is in burning. ואין כל איסורים שבתורה בשריפה. But other prohibitions in the Torah, you don't need to burn. You can destroy them in other ways. ואף חמץ בכלל כל האיסורים. And חמץ is all the other prohibitions. This is תוספות, דיבור המתחיל אמרו לו על פי הגמרא שם. אוקיי. ביארנו טעמי המחלוקת של רבי יהודה וחכמים לפי מסקנת הברייתא. We explained this disagreement of רבי יהודה and the sages according to the ברייתא in the Gemara. אבל הרב מברטנורה מבאר את טעמו של רבי יהודה. The ברטנורה explains the reason of רבי יהודה שלמד מנותר בדרך אחרת. He learns it from notar in a different way. He learns from the sacrifice in a different manner. נותר, what does it say? נותר אסור באכילה והנאה. It says, look, sacrifices that remain after the allotted times, they're prohibited in eating and in enjoying, ve'anush karet, and the punishment is getting cut off from the Jewish nation. Ve'chametz, asur ba'achila u'ba'ana'a, ve'anush karet. And chametz is exactly the same thing. It's prohibited in eating and enjoyment, and punishment is getting cut off from the Jewish nation. Ma notar besrefa, chametz besrefa. So it's the same level. Just like notar you have to burn, chametz you also need to burn. Beram, chachamim amru lo, but the sages told him, chelbo shel shor haniskal yuchriach. They told him the fat of a bull that you have to kill because he killed a human, that is going to prove. She'asur be'achila, the fat is prohibited in eating, u'be'ana'a, it's also prohibited in enjoyment, ve'anush karet, and the punishment is karet, ve'no ta'un srefa, and according to you, why don't have to burn it? You can just throw it to the dogs or whatever. Ayen Taisves Rabbi Akiva Iger, so he says they don't agree with, the Chachamim don't agree with Rabbi Yehuda. The Machloket Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim.